This podcast was recorded on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
Hello and welcome to The Real Story with Joe Hildebrand. I'm Waleed Ali. Just kidding. I'm Joe Hildebrand because that's who it's The Real Story with. Although not according to pretty much everyone who ever sees me in the street. So, hey, you're that guy from the project. It's like, yeah, fine, whatever. Yeah. Can I get a selfie? Yeah, sure, yeah. What was your name again? Waleed. Anyway, here's what's coming up on the show. We've got the inside story into Peter Dutton's secret property portfolio. Yes, he actually owns half of Australia. Or does he? That's certainly what's being put about, but I'm not quite sure that it's true. Also, what is Donald Trump up to in the Ukraine? I know we talked a bit about this yesterday. It turns out that he might be shutting down World War III or starting it. Whatever, I'm not quite sure, just so he can get a better deal from the Ukrainian government on this secret project the US has got on the side. So we'll tell you all about that. Plus, last week we gave you the election date. This week, we're giving you the result. Yes, we are going to tell you what the election result is going to be with the guy who predicted the Donald Trump election victory when everybody else had written him off. So all that and more coming up. Plus, I'm Waleed Ali. Well, you know the election campaign has really begun in earnest when the two parties' dirt units get up and running. They've got little bits of paper, little bits of research. Everyone's been Googling, combing through all the social media accounts to find out anyone who's said something dodgy, anyone who's, throwing Nazi salutes, perhaps. That seems to be a thing these days. Not drowning, not waving, just Heil Hitlering. That's nice, isn't it? Not drowning, not waving, just Sig Hailing. Good name for a rock band. Anyway. And the one that's doing the rounds this week is that Peter Dutton has this massive property portfolio and also that he bought shares in the big banks just before the financial crisis. At the time, the Rudd government propped up those big banks and underwrote them. In other words, made the banks as safe as houses, which meant that their share prices went up. And thanks to a bit of good luck, Peter Dutton had bought shares in the banks just a few days earlier. Now, Peter Dutton says he's done absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, he says, look, I could see the banks. I could see their balance sheet. I knew they were going to be a good thing. And, whatever. He's invested shrewdly. He's made a bit of money. All good. I don't think anyone's going to be able to make that stick. But the thing that has sort of brought it back is that Peter Dutton basically owns half of Australia. Peter Dutton had this massive property portfolio. And whether he has it anymore is a matter of dispute. He's been accused of still having it. I don't think he actually does. I think he's offloaded it, but he used to have it. It was meant to be worth something like $30 million or whatever, and it got him into trouble a few years ago when it turned out that a trust that he was a beneficiary of that was actually owned and operated by his wife owned some childcare centres that received some government funding. And there were people saying, well, this actually violates a section of the Constitution which says an MP can't be the beneficiary of funds from the Commonwealth. Now, I don't know if anyone's noticed or not, but Peter Dutton is still an MP. He is still in Parliament. In fact, he's the opposition leader, and he is arguably the favourite. Well, he is the favourite, according to bookies, to become the next Prime Minister. So clearly that allegation didn't stick. But he has, it seems, divested himself of all these properties. Shows he's getting serious about the top job. He's got rid of all this stuff, so now he's just got the family home and presumably a shitload of money somewhere. But this is the thing, right? This has sort of been known and talked about, and people have been trying to get this story up, like I said, for years. That there was even potentially constitutional impropriety about this property portfolio. And it hasn't really done Peter Dutton any damage at all. And yet, as the old saying about Luigi the goat fucker goes, you do all this great stuff, save the world, and you fuck one goat, and it's all people talk about. And this is the PM's problem. This is why I feel sorry for Albo. He buys one house, one clifftop mansion. He says it's not even a mansion, and he's renting it out, so he's helping the housing crisis. This guy should be getting a medal. But everyone's jumping up and down about this one house that the PM has bought and not paying any attention to the God knows how many houses that Peter Dutton has bought up and flipped over the years. And a Labor mate of mine and I were talking about this and saying, why is it that this has really sort of stuck in the national imagination? And it is the thing that people keep talking about. You talk about, what people, in the street think. You talk about, what my mate Max the barber, what he thinks about the Albanese government. The first thing he brings up is that beach house in Copacabana. Firstly, it's not even a beach house. It's a clifftop mansion. It's not even a mansion. It's just a very large house on a cliff overlooking the water. Anyway, good on him. Put it on. And this is what my mate, very well-connected bloke in the Labor Party was saying. He said the problem is that $30 million or whatever it was, property portfolio that Peter Dutton's got in a family trust somewhere or whatever, or doesn't anymore, but had, all these potential conflict of interest they tried to bring up that it might have violated this or that section of the Constitution. You can't really picture it. You can't really sort of see it in your head. It's not relatable to the average person. But the average person does know what a beachfront house looks like. And worse still, because it's not quite a mansion and because it's in this sort of central coast where a lot of people have holiday houses, a lot of middle-class people have weekenders there, it's relatable. And so it's the sort of thing that people can look at and say, you know what? I could almost have a house like that. Or gee whiz, I'd love to have a house like that. And maybe it's just a dream and we'll never get there, but it's not impossible. It's relatable. And so as soon as something is relatable and tangible to people, suddenly it sticks in their mind. And so people think, hang on a minute, he's bought that beach house while I'm struggling to hold on to my own house. That ain't right. So all the, the tax cuts, the wage increases, the power bill relief, the free childcare, the free TAFE, all these things the Albanese government has done and isn't getting any credit for. But you buy one clifftop mansion, suddenly the whole show's over. And now I just want to go back to Trump and Ukraine. And I know we talked about it last week, but I just can't get enough of it. A, it's Donald Trump. And B, if World War III does happen to break out, it'd be pretty weird if the most groundbreaking, insightful news podcast on the planet failed to mention it. So what is Donald Trump doing when it comes to Ukraine? What's he doing sitting down with Putin? They haven't actually met yet, but their people have been meeting, and it's just been Russia and the US, no Ukraine involved in these negotiations. And of course, people are saying, well, hang on a minute. How can you negotiate a peace between Ukraine and Russia when Ukraine isn't even at the table? And we've since learned, and there's since been some really sort of illuminating things about that negotiation process. And it's been illuminating on a huge number of levels. Firstly, in terms of the way Trump backers here in Australia have reacted to it. There have been people who are all in on Donald Trump and they're suddenly going, hang on, what's he doing? We're on Ukraine's side. And now he's selling them down the river. I had a really senior, high-profile journo, an incredible journo, Walkley winner, super, super smart. And she says to me, what's he doing? What's he doing? And I said to her, what do you mean, what is he doing? He's being Donald Trump. He's doing the exact same thing he always does. The only difference is now he's doing it on an issue that you disagree with. So the only thing that has actually changed is that this time the bomb that he's lobbing, the missile that he's firing, is not at one of your enemies. It's at someone you think of as an ally. So it's a bit like, now you know how the left feels. But there was this sort of genuine confusion because I think there are people there who think that Donald Trump is the Messiah. And as Brian's mum said in The Life of Brian, he's not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy. And yes, he goes around slapping tariffs on Mexico, and that's funny. He slaps tariffs on Canada, and that's funny. Then he slaps tariffs on Australia. Hang on a minute. What are you doing? That's out of order. And again, he goes around, he tells tells Palestine or tells Hamas that they better bloody get their act together or he'll rubblize them if they don't hand over all the hostages, or they better get their act together in Gaza or he'll turn the whole thing into a beachfront condo. And you think, yeah, that's right. He's getting in there, being tough, cracking down on them. And, he tells Ukraine they better get their act together and come to the table and sort out and go, hang on a minute. What, now you're doing it to them? But again, it is just Trump being Trump. And people say, but he's not being good anymore. It's like Trump was never good. Trump didn't promise to make America good again. He promised to make it great again. Trump is not about moral rectitude. And it would be pretty funny, given his background, if he was. He knows he can't carry that out. He can't say, I'm purer than the driven snow and I'm going to restore American integrity, restore American purity. He's not doing that. He's restoring American strength. Strength is the only language that Donald Trump speaks and understands. And he actually is totally open about this. He does not hide it. He went on Fox News since the last podcast. He went on and he actually explained why he was just cutting Ukraine out of the equation. He said, they don't have any cards. They don't have any cards to deal. So it didn't matter if they were in the right or not, or if they were the victim. All that mattered was whether or not they were in a position of strength, if they were in a position to be able to bargain. And Trump thought they've got nothing. He looks at the map. Russia's all over them like a cheap suit. Ukraine's got one tiny speck in Russia by way of payback. Russia's carved out half of eastern Ukraine. And he says, well, clearly Russia is the tough guy here. Clearly Russia has more cards to deal with. I'm going to deal with them. And he says it completely and utterly openly. But there is something else that's going on at the same time, which gives an even greater layer of sort of ultra deal making. I mean, this is where Trump is at his best, just this massive kind of power play. And that is that it emerged after all this came out that America is trying to get the rights for these rare earth minerals that Ukraine has in the grounds. And these are obviously the stuff that makes all this sort of super high-tech stuff that we all rely upon these days and without which the world would come crashing to the ground. And there's a gold mine, figuratively, underneath Ukraine, and the US wants access to it. And Ukraine, in what might be described as famous last words, told the US, nah, we're not giving you rights to these rare earths unless you guarantee security for Ukraine against Russia. And instead of saying, oh, okay, yes, sure, of course. Anything else you'd like, Mr. Zelensky? Trump and America just go straight to Russia and say, right, we'll give you whatever you want. You can have Ukraine. You just name it. I mean, Ukraine's not here. You ask for whatever you want. And Ukraine sees that happening, shits itself, then says, oh, sorry, those rare earths, yes, sure, here, what were you? And strangely enough, that deal is now progressing very, very quickly and is probably going to be finalised very, very soon. And again, so this is what Trump does. He says, right, you've got this thing that I want, give it to me. Ukraine says no. Trump goes, right, we'll wipe you off the face of the planet. Now give it to me. Ukraine says yes. It's pretty simple. And so people, and again, I was listening to someone talk about, an historian said this about Alexander the Great and questions about whether Alexander the Great was actually a good guy or a bad guy. And obviously, opinion's pretty divided. I mean, he did kill a lot of people. And this historian said, to question whether he's good or bad is the wrong question. He's not good or bad. He's just an apex predator. It's like saying, is a Tyrannosaurus Rex good or bad? Is a great white shark good or bad? It doesn't matter if it's good or bad or not. All that matters is that it's there and it has to be dealt with. And so this is the same question about Donald Trump. Is he good or bad? It doesn't matter. He's neither. He's just an apex predator. So it doesn't matter whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. All that matters is whether or not you're in his way. Well, last week we gave you the date of the upcoming federal election and we thought, how can we top that? Well, we'll give you the result. We can just call the whole thing off, call the AEC. No need to actually go to the polls because our resident guru, Tim Gleeson, is going to tell us what the result is going to be. Give or take, ballpark-ish. He's an ideas man, and he joins me on the line right now. G'day, Timmy G. How are you, mate?
Good, Joseph. How are you?
Very, very well. Now, you correctly predicted the election of Donald Trump when plenty of people were saying that it wasn't going to happen. And now we've got another election a little bit closer to home. What's your read on the situation here? Is Albo in as much trouble as everyone seems to think he is?
No, well, firstly, I'm taking this very seriously because I heard on the ABC this morning Anthony Green is retiring.
Oh, this is your moment to shine.
I'm thinking, here I come, ABC 2028. So you're going to get my full wisdom today.
I like it. The AB Timmy G. Just remember where you came from, okay?
That's right.
I'm glad we're launching careers here on the podcast, but just remember who launched you into the stratosphere. So obviously, Peter Dutton came out just a few days ago and says, I'm going to win this, which is a weird thing for an opposition leader to say, because usually even if you think you're going to win, you want to be playing the underdog card. But the bookies have him as favourite. There are more and more people now saying that the coalition could actually pick up the 20 or so seats it needs to, or rather probably more like the 10 to sort of 12 maybe that it could possibly form minority government with. What's your read of the situation?
Well, firstly, disregard the bookmakers because in 2019, a couple of days before the election, Bill Shorten was $1.22 to win the election and Scott Morrison was $4.50, which basically meant if you put $100 on Scott Morrison, you got back $450, and $100 on Bill Shorten, you're getting back $120. And it didn't work out well, especially for the guy who had $1 million on Bill Shorten. But
Okay.
I wouldn't say anyone's across the line in this election, and I think it's really naive to say that. I think one way or another it's going to be a minority government. I can't see. There's currently 15 independents. There will be before this. There has been North Sydney has been, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
So there'll be 15 independents, and I think you'd agree most, if not all, will be re-elected. So if we take that as a starting point, 15, and there might even be one more in Bradfield, but let's just say right. 15.
Okay.
So if you take that 15 off the top, there's 135 seats left. Is that right, Joseph?
Yep. 135? That sounds about right to me.
Yeah. It's going to be very hard for anyone to get to majority government. Basically, Peter Dutton has to win 19 seats to get to majority government, which, if that happens, that means a Labor vote has beyond collapse. That would be, a monstrosity of a performance. So one way or another, it's going to be a minority government. It just depends who's going to win on the night. And basically, I say to Labor have 78 seats at the moment. The Coalition have 57. And I think the magic number for Labor is probably 68. If they start dropping below 68, they're basically in big, big trouble.
And that 68 number, is that so that they can stitch together enough crossbench votes without basically having to scrape the bottom of the barrel?
68 would be a net loss of 10 seats. So if they lost 68 and they all went to the Coalition, so they lost 68, the Coalition then would have 67. So Labor also then would have that moral authority. They'd have one more seat because they're not going to have, their vote will go down, the Coalitions will go up, the Coalition will probably have a bigger two-party preferred vote. They'll have a swing to them. They would have won seats. So Labor really have to win, I think, at least equal to or more seats. But 68 is probably the number. And that's right, because at 68, I think Labor would be confident of getting enough independents and the Greens to form government. You take 4 Greens, presuming they get re-elected, and Wilkie as a starting point, you're at 73. And seeing you need 76, you're basically almost there.
Probably get a couple of Teals as well. You might get Rebecca Sharkey, Helen Haynes.
If you get those 5, there's 10 independents left after you get to 73. So you'd need 3 out of 10 of the remaining 10. So you'd be confident you could do that. whatever it took to get 3 across the line, you'd be pretty confident to do that. But once it starts getting below 68, it becomes a lot more difficult. And even the idea that you're publicly saying that you've won less seats than the opposition, who have got a bigger vote than you, had a swing to them, but then it even makes it harder just numerically to find that coalition to get them together, particularly when most of those independents you'd be relying on are coming from seats that are traditionally Liberal or National Party seats.
And wouldn't the Governor-General would ask the person with the party with the most seats to try to form government? That's how conventionally it would operate, isn't it?
On the night, Labor has to, or Liberal, whoever has around 70 seats has to be really present a message that they're really confident of forming government. This is one of the mistakes. I know Al Gore made this mistake back in, 2000, where he did concede and then took the concession back. So I say if Labor have...
It's not a hallmark of a confident victor, is it?
And then you're just in a position where even if you're really in a tough position. So I'd say if Labor think they've won 68 or 69, they should really announce they think they're confident of getting into the low to mid 70s, and with the support of the Greens. And so we're confident we can form government. They should be saying that on the night to sort of put a flag in the ground.
Yeah, gotcha. And what are the seats to watch? I mean, you mentioned 4 Greens potentially in the lower house, but 3 of those Green seats in Brisbane, I mean, a couple of those might go Labor's way. Is that ridiculously optimistic, or...?
It's not impossible, but I think it'll be more difficult than you think, because Griffith has got a really high-profile Green, and apparently they're running a really good campaign, the Greens. Brisbane's the same. So though on paper it looks possible, it may be difficult. But if Labor could snatch one of those seats in Queensland and Fowler back in Western Sydney, it puts them obviously in a lot better position. So then they could theoretically lose 1 or more 2 seats to the coalition and still be with a fight. But I'd say the seats to look, if you give away seats at the top end, and I don't want to rattle off seats and kill off political careers, but if you give away seats really at the top end where Labor are struggling, and there's probably about 10, Gilmore Menzies, Aston after the by-election, which will probably just flip back. There's a new seat in WA called Bullwingle, which although notionally Labor, it's set on a high base from last election. So you presume that may swing immediately to the coalition. McEwen, the vote's been coming down for some time, every election in Victoria. And then you've got seats like Chisholm, Patterson, Lingari in Northern Territory. Those seats, you think they're the seats under real pressure. And that's sort of 9 or 10. Now, you can lose all of them theoretically and still hold on. So the seats you'd really want to look at, though, is a seat like Robertson on the central coast of New South Wales, where Labor have got a first-term MP, Dr. Gordon Reid, who's a fantastic candidate. So if Labor were to lose him, or say Andrew Charlton in Parramatta, the same first-term, he's a fantastic
Don't even say
candidate.
it. If Charlton goes, we're all doomed.
Or say even in the Hunter, where Riccicelli, if he were to lose, if Labor are losing those types of seats, they're in real, real trouble.
And of course, Parramatta is the sort of the demographic centre of Sydney. It is ultra suburbia. It used to be solidly working class Labor heartland. It's since become more aspirational. It flips between Labor and the Libs.
Yeah, Parramatta is basically a city in itself. Yeah,
that's right. And it's got a star candidate, and like Andrew Charlton is one of Labor's standout candidates. If he can't hold a seat like Parramatta, I suppose I'm saying as goes Parramatta, goes the country.
That's right. If we don't hold Parramatta, talk about a bellwether, we're not winning government or holding on to government. And I love the way I just said we there, like I'm a member.
Well, likewise, I'm a completely impartial, independent, fair and balanced journalist.
Labor just have to hold Parramatta. If you're losing Parramatta, there's a fair chance that seats like Werriwa, Dunkley, and even seats on the Central Coast like Dobell, if you're losing those, there's probably a fair likelihood that Peter Gunton's won majority government.
And again, some people are saying that seats like Werriwa, Gough Whitlam's old seat, quintessentially Western Sydney, some people are saying that could be within striking distance for the coalition. Is that a real fear, do you reckon?
There is, but some of those seats occasionally drop from the sky, one or two of those, and you can still win government. So it not surprising, but it on its own, it wouldn't be a death knell. But if it fell, and those others which I just previously mentioned fell, yeah, the government would be in real trouble.
And a couple you mentioned, including Parramatta and Werriwa, as well as, of course, those real sort of heartland seats in southwestern Sydney, like Blacksland, by Jason Clare's seat, Tony Burke's seat of Watson, and, of course, Chris Bowen's seat as well. They are getting the Muslim vote ticket challenging them. So the Muslim vote.
Make it clear. They're all fine, Joseph. They're all
okay, fine. So, after my incredibly dramatic setup,
they're all fine. Like if Labor were to, I don't know what's happened in the next month, but they're all fine. I mean, if the Labor, they'll be fine.
I think they are also fielding candidates in Werriwa and Parramatta, though, which have smaller margins. And do you reckon in those seats it could have a difference?
Yeah, I think, though, sometimes that it's overstated and it's insulting that because there's a candidate from a certain race or religion that everybody in that electorate from that race or that religion is automatically going to vote for that candidate. So I think we've seen that over and over again. That's not the case. And I think if Labor were to lose some of those other seats, it's not just because of individual third-party candidates. It's basically you're losing them to the Liberal Party.
What about seats that have been talk that sort of concerns about the future of coal mining and that sort of stuff could make seats, further up towards Newcastle vulnerable, seats like Shortland, for example? Do you see much in that?
Yeah, Labor are lucky. They're good candidates they've got really good candidates on a whole across the Hunter. And I'm not having a dig here, but the Liberals aren't selecting, I'm not saying they're solid candidates, but let's just say solid at the lower end of solid. So Labor, and there's a long history. Labor's been losing the Hunter, I think, for 25 years. It's always, I remember, since I was first voting, it's always, and they manage to win the Hunter. And by and large, they have really good candidates and do a good job in the Hunter. So once again, if Labor loses the Hunter, they've lost a lot of things before that. I'm pretty confident Labor will hold the Hunter.
Good. And the other weird thing about the election result last time around in 2022 was this big WA wave that came through, and quite frankly, the party would have been in a lot of trouble had that not happened. Do you think they're going to hold on to seats like Tangney in WA and those seats that were sort of built on the huge popularity of Mark McGowan?
I think Tangney's a tough one. That's going to be difficult to hold, but that's one where Labor could lose and still form government. That'd be in that 8 to 10. And the new seat of Bullwinkle, which I think is about 4% nationally Labor, that's also one of those ones where on the map and on the numbers, this made-up seat is a Labor seat, but it may be difficult to hold. But Labor could lose those two seats and still form government. So,
and what about sort of, the odd sort of surprise? Do you think there's any chance they could, for example, pick up Sturt in South Australia?
No, we've been winning Sturt. No. We've been winning Sturt for 30 years and never win. Honestly, no matter how close it gets, we're going to win Sturt. It just doesn't happen for some reason. Almost like the electorate just toys with you. Almost like
yeah. I mean, last time it went from like 7% to 0.5%. So they go right up to the edge of the cliff and then just stop.
You're giving a dog a little treat. You wave it in front of its mouth, but then you throw it in the bin. It's just. We're always winning Sturt and never happens. So I shouldn't say that. The candidate's a fantastic candidate, of course, but
great candidate. Did wonderfully last time round.
Also, the coalition have 8 seats they have to defend under 1.5%, give it to 1.7%. So the coalition, I don't think they're going to lose many of those seats, if any, but they do have to spend a lot of resources, including the opposition leader. He'll be fine, but they have to spend a lot of resources on the bottom end of their seats. So there is, it's not all one-way traffic.
Yeah, that's right. It just sucks up.
That they're just going to pick off seats left, right, and centre without doing things themselves.
So it's reports of the Albanese government's death have been greatly exaggerated.
Exaggerated, yeah, like that camper who went missing or the bushwalker. That's greatly exaggerated. They found him. I will say Victoria. My home state, that's basically where the election's going to be decided. Like, seats haven't changed hands in Victoria in the last 25 years. I think less than a handful of seats have changed hands. I mean,
Yeah, it's
in
usually
Queensland,
really,
New
really
South
boring.
Wales, you lose 6 or 7 in a big election in the one time. So, but at this, I think Labor holds 4 seats in Victoria under 4%. There's another 6 between about 5 and 8%. And that's where it's going to come down to. If Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party can pick off some of those seats they haven't been able to pick up for 25 years. Labor votes in Victoria, I think, under Bill Shorten was 54%, two-party preferred. It was 53% last election.
That's a lot of fat that could get.
Yeah, but what has been a sort of under the radar no one's talked about, in all of those seats, Labor's primary vote went down at the last election by at least 2 or 3%. In some seats, like I think it was Hawke and Holt, don't hold me to that, but it went down between 7 and 10% because it was in the middle of the pandemic when Victoria was in lockdown or just on the end of that. There was a lot of venting at that electorate. So you look at those numbers, there's no real fat, even though there's no juiced up fat in those Victorian numbers.
So the Labor's already done so badly that it can't really do that much worse. That's
Yeah,
the
some
good
of them
news.
have gone down the last 2 elections.
Yeah,
So I'm not
yeah.
saying, but yeah, the true believers, that might be a true believer number, some of those. And
Gotcha.
I think what would be a red flag for the Liberal Party is a couple of weeks ago there was a state by-election in Werribee. The retiring treasurer, Tim Pallas, ended up the swing was 10%, which is basically a by-election swing. And if there ever was a message or a chance to get a baseball bat and take it to a state government who've got a huge majority, that was the opportunity. And though Labor's first preference vote went down by about 15%, the Liberal first preference vote didn't rise at all. And of that, it went to other parties. And in the end, not enough people who voted for a minor party or for the Greens or an independent couldn't bring themselves to preference the Liberal Party over the Labor Party. So that's what it's going to come down to, I think, is Peter Dutton able to attract enough independents who'll preference him before they will the Labor Party.
There you go. So you heard it here first. Around 68 seats, you reckon, is the magic number. Anything less than that, bye-bye, Albo. It's been nice knowing you. And do you reckon they can get it above that 68 number, or do you reckon?
Yeah, I don't think that's set in stone. I think if Labor get a 7 in front of it, Labor
That's a miracle.
are home. But there is a way, because we're sitting here now just writing off 10 seats. Like those candidates have no chance. There's a good chance Labor, can get a 7 in front of it. Obviously, if you just hold 2 or 3 of those seats. And most people I spoke to, both based on the Liberal side and the Labor side, very not confident either of winning a great amount of seats or forming majority governments. So, of course, it's up in the air.
There you go. Well, Timmy G, election analyst extraordinaire, political guru, all-round ideas, man. Thank you so much for joining us on The Real Story.
That's all right. Remember, 68, Joseph. That's a low
68.
bar. So if
The
you're
summer of
watching at
68.
home and it stays at 68 or above, a South Sydney fan is still in a lodge, which is good for everybody.
Amen. And that is all we have time for this week. Thank you so much for your company. If you'd like to get in touch with us, don't bother going to my Instagram account because it's been hacked by someone. I don't even know who by because I can't get into it to see. You might want to send them a message and say, hey, give Joey's Instagram account back, but I don't really care. Don't really mind. You can have it. You can, however, send me an email at therealstory@novapodcast.com.au. And of course, you can leave us a review. You can rate us 5 stars. You can catch me every Monday and Saturday in various News Corp papers. I think I write for pretty much all of them. And in the meantime, we'll see you next week.